All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Katy and welcome to the Katy G podcast series. So the mission of my podcast is for us to realize that we're really great as people and as a brand, and that we can be even greater, and most importantly, how we can bring this greatness to the world through our brand, whatever we do for a living. And why the Katy G podcast? Well, two reasons. One, I care about humanity deeply, and I want us all to see how great we really are, to be happier in our lives and our careers. And the second reason is, look, I'm human. I struggle with my own feelings of being less than and valuing myself and enunciating my story and selling myself just like everyone else does. And some days are good, some days aren't. So this time, the podcast is all about immigration law. And my guest today is Edwin Reyes. He's an immigration lawyer from Houston, Texas. And he brings a wonderful complimentary flavor to the interview I did not too long ago with Judge Ashley Tabador, who is the president of the National Association of Immigration Judges. So welcome, Edwin. Thanks for being on my show.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So, Edwin, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, your story, whatever you want us to know, and specifically, why did you decide to become a lawyer?
So I'm the second child of four children. My mom and dad both came from El Salvador in the 80s. They were fleeing the civil war in El Salvador. So I've had that as a strong, basically a very strong foundation of who I am today. I've always had that as a basis of a person, that my parents fled their home country and basically have to start all over in a new country. And I believe that's basically what made me an immigration attorney. I've always saw my parents struggle, not just with the language barrier, but also the access to justice and everything else. People taking advantage of them because of that, and that injustice is what really pushed me to strive to become an attorney. I've always believed and still do believe that everybody should have equal access to justice and everyone should be treated equal. And I did see how a lot of the things, especially around immigration, were not taken as serious as they should. A lot of people, even within our own culture, would take advantage of the immigrants. So I wanted to be an honest attorney. I wanted to represent the people, and I wanted to give them an honest perspective of what they expect, and the best fighting chance they can.
Wow, that is so well said. And I can relate to so much of that, right? So many of us can, including the other people that I've interviewed, and Judge Tabador included. Really, it's a refugee status we share, and this real drive, like you said so eloquently, to make sure and access to justice. For those of you who are listening who are not lawyers, is a term that we use a lot at the American Bar Association and lawyers throughout North America, because fundamentally it's exactly what Edwin said, that everyone deserves the right to be represented and have their, what's the right word, day in court, Edwin, and be able to be treated fairly. And for those of you who know me well, one of my core values is fairness. So everything Edwin says resonates. But I really thank you for bringing that flavor to your story, the background that you come from fleeing a different kind of war than I fled from Iran, same concept though, and coming and wanting to then be so self-aware that you actually allow that for others to thrive where your parents didn't get that ability, but you're going to do your part in making sure you serve your purpose and have that be a right access to justice for other immigrants who deserve to have their fair shake, for lack of a better word. So thank you for doing that. So did I say it right? Is there anything else
Yes,
you want to
correct.
add to that?
No, I
That's
think everything you
fantastic.
said is on point.
So tell me, what have you found to be the most, let's see, satisfying, fulfilling part of your practice? as an immigration lawyer. And we can talk about how things have changed over time with what's going on right now, because I have a lot of immigration lawyer clients, and I know things are different right now. We won't say tough, we'll just call it different. But um, yeah, what's been the most satisfying part of your practice?
The most satisfying part of my practice is actually being able to change someone's life. Earlier this week, I had a client in here in tears because she never thought she'll have received her green card, and we actually received it. She was also a refugee fleeing from Nicaragua. And stories like that obviously are the ones that make us happy and want to fight another day. But honestly, the most satisfying part of my job is actually listening to the clients, hearing their story, and seeing why they came to this country. Not everybody comes here with the same story, and oftentimes we deal with less educated individuals, and we have to help them craft their story to better suit the immigration laws that they're going to face. And oftentimes, what they think is significant may not be as significant as what something else in their story. So oftentimes it's just listening to a story, understanding where they're coming from, trying to understand sometimes, and then from there just helping them make their best case forward, put their best argument forward so they could actually win.
Sounds like you and I do the same thing almost, but I know we obviously don't. But yeah, I mean, it's all in the story, right? And I think what you're saying is so amazing. We don't know where our stories are relevancy wise to what our goals are. We just know who we are. And sometimes we're not even sure about that, frankly, because we don't delve into our stories the way we should. And so you're one to unearth the story just like I am for my clients. And then your purpose then becomes allowing them to use their story to access justice correctly and get the results, like getting the green card. I remember the day my family got our green cards. It was so exciting. For those of you who have my listeners that have no idea what we're talking about or have never gone through that experience, that's fine. That's great. Get in touch with someone who can share their green card story with you. It's enlightening to say the least, but let's just say I always appreciate my freedom and my liberty and being a citizen. And so I think it's fantastic that you bring that for other people to the table. So, what's the hardest part then? And maybe that's where we transition into what's going on these days with immigration law in the country.
I think that the hardest part is also that some days, you do hear very traumatic stories and haunting stories that you can't just sleep away at night, and oftentimes if you're really involved in the cases as much as I am in most of my cases, I think about the cases way too much. Even at night when I'm trying to sleep, something comes up, try to better craft an argument, but sometimes some of the things people have lived are very haunting, traumatic, and type of a post-secondary, like secondary post-traumatic stress disorder. Oftentimes we do suffer with that ourselves. And it's hard sometimes to separate from your job, and that's one of the biggest struggles that I suffered with earlier in my career. Now, doing this for so many years, it's a little bit easier for me to not take it so much to heart, and it just use it more so now as a motivator to help me fight more further cases. And the other part too is, sometimes is bringing some of these clients back to reality. They're so hopeful that they're going to win their case, and I have to just put the story in context to the actual immigration law, the current immigration law. And oftentimes, I just have to tell them, there's no chance that you have of winning, and at that point, it's just mitigating, their stories to give them just something so they could at least believe they did everything they could to try to stay in the country.
Got it. So tell me, thanks for your honesty. How did you reconcile the pressure? You didn't call it pressure, but that's what I got out of it, and being able to sleep at night. Because, I mean, for folks who are listening, other lawyers, my practice was securities law. Most of my clients were mutual funds, advisors, big companies, I didn't go to bed worried about whether somebody's liberty was at stake and how I could craft a better argument so they could sleep well. And I didn't have haunting stories. And practice areas differ. And so I really respect that yours is one of those, but I respect you even more that you care so much that this was an issue for you. And I'm sure it still is. So, for those of people who are listening who are still in the throes of this or have not really stopped to give it much thought, how did you, oh, for lack of a better word, overcome it? And like you said, be able to then channel that into better representation, I guess is what I heard you say.
Part of it is just learning to tap into my listening skills. Give them the stage. Sometimes just having someone to listen to their story uh, does so much good for the client, and I just take that as what it is. I'm helping them. I'm taking the load off of their backs by just listening to a story. Oftentimes, nobody wants to listen to the story when they first get interviewed by immigration. It's not really their story; it's answer the questions I want to hear. So the little nuances that their story may take, or just all the details combined, makes the case stronger. And sometimes it does help, sometimes it doesn't help, but I just take away that I am helping them a little bit by listening to their story, giving them a stage to actually voice everything. And then from there, we start crafting what we can do. At this point, I look at my job sometimes as more of a therapist, and where I try to help them cope with some of their traumatic experiences. And I also give them hope that, you live this, but from this dark time, we're going to get to the bright side. And sometimes it works. And oftentimes, we're faced with very complicated laws that we can't even get there. But, sometimes I have to point them to the direction of where they could actually get better help from a licensed therapist, or from a women's shelter, or wherever they may need the help from.
Wow. You said so much there that we could unpack, but the most eloquent thing you said is that it is therapeutic value. Like, you and I are not therapists, and I throw myself into that ring with you because not just when I was a lawyer, but now so many of my clients tell me there's therapeutic value to the work I do with people, even though I'm not a therapist. And if we stop and think about it, everyone who's listening to this, listen to what Edwin said. Every one of us has the capacity to serve our purpose by bringing listening skills that allow us to be good counselors. And, lawyers are counselors at law, but even if you're not a practicing lawyer and you're listening to this, right now I'm not practicing as a lawyer in what I do, but it's still the same listening skills that allow people to voice their concerns. And then it's a consultative approach with helping people really to achieve their end results, even if you can't be the solution. So it really is about caring about people and bringing your life purpose to the table. So that's really what I got from what you just said. And specifically to my question to you, that's a brilliant way to overcome the stress of the pressure of the job, is what I heard you say, that you rechannel it and repurpose it and funnel it into bringing value and really knowing that they're a human being instead of a number, or worse, we get all businessy in our heads, right? Because we got to pay the bills and we got to be pragmatic. So everyone becomes a revenue generating, who pays the lights, who pays for the mortgage, who pays for this, right? But we're people. Clients are people at the end of the day. So that's amazing. Thank you, Edwin. And I can see how it can definitely work for you. So how are you taking this trying time in immigration law and making it work for you and your clients? Besides the fact that COVID is a whole overlay on top of all of that nightmare that's going on.
So right now, the biggest thing I could do for my clients is educate them about the changes in the law, stay up to date with every little policy change that we're encountering, as well as every time the president or one of or the Department of Justice, Department of Homeland Security, whoever makes a change, I have to stay on abreast to all the new changes, educate them, and just keep trying to help them achieve the best results by helping them gather the best evidence we can, and also stay up to date, because in what a case that would have won yesterday may not win tomorrow. And on top of that, it's also realizing what judges we're facing. People do not understand what of a difference it makes, having Judge A versus Judge B. Some judges are really tough to win in front of, and the requirements that they ask are completely unobtainable. So therefore, we have to keep our clients' perspective in line with the current reality. And at that point, I tell my clients, what we're doing here is just trying to make the best argument we have on hand, because more likely than not, we're going to have to try to go forward with an appeal.
Wow. So obviously, there's circumstances that are outside of your control, like who sits on the bench and who hears the case. And that's a lesson in and of itself, how to manage a process that you can't have full control in, right?
Yes, and that's one of the bigger things that I've learned over the years. I've had colleagues that like rehearsing everything like it's a script, um, and I just think that has never worked. I have never seen it work in court. I've gone to court with other attorneys that have done that, and if the judge has something out of their script, or asks a question they weren't prepared for, it just throws everything out of whack. So I just think that you have to be very fluid, prepare for the worst, but just practice for everything. Make sure you know the client's story inside and out, so you could draw them back to the strong points if needed, and also help them mitigate the damaging parts of their case.
Absolutely. I totally see what you're saying because, like I always say, flexible brands win. If we're not nimble and flexible and have some spontaneity and to be able to pivot and change. I mean, look at all the things we have to pivot and change with in our world today. Pandemic being number one, immigration law changes being two in your world. And really, it impacts everybody. It's not just your clients that are impacted, it's the economy that's impacted. And what was it I heard today? That Britain is officially now in its recession, the first recession they've had in 11 years. It's strictly brought on due to COVID-19. So people have to be flexible and pivot. And I agree with you. I mean, even these podcasts, oftentimes my guests are like, are we going to rehearse? And I'm like, no, we're not going to rehearse. We're just having a conversation and nothing is edited unless it's something that, is egregious and we can't have it on the air. But otherwise, no, it's a fluid dialogue and it's all about authenticity, carefully crafted to really take into account mitigating factors and changes and things that just get thrown at us. But that's where authenticity is so important, I think. So I really see how you bring that value to your clients in times of unrest. And so, what keeps you going, Edwin? At the end of the day, what keeps you going?
Family. Everything I do right now is for my family. I have three boys, so everything I do is basically for them. And I also have my parents that I love so much and see almost on a daily basis. So, it's a daily reminder when I see my mom and dad, why I do this. And then I also see my kids, and I also see that I want a more equal future. So I also do want them to live in a better society than what we lived in. I don't want them to face any adversity just because of who they are and just the way they look. So I do it for both of them, and I hope that, I am making some type of change for them in their long run.
Wow. Well said. You are, for sure you are. And I'm proud to know you for that reason. Well said. So, no better stopping point than there in order to switch gears and address something that'll help you and bring value to you and to the listeners. So, this is the part where we transition into coach mode. And what's one topic that's weighing on your mind or you want to bring to the table that's taking up your thinking time these days? And I'll coach you through it. And as you do, as you get coached, the listeners really benefit. And of course, I appreciate you bringing your topic to the table, because it's probably not just your topic, it's a lot of other people's topics too that they can learn from you.
One thing that always kind of bothers me, and I talked to about this before with you, is just that whole notion of the imposter syndrome. Like, I feel like I'm not good enough to be an attorney sometimes because my parents are immigrants, and that's the hardest part. Sometimes I have that whole notion in my head where like, is it ever going to be good enough? Am I ever going to be good enough to be an attorney? And even when clients come here praising me, it's just sometimes it's really hard to even to take it as a praise, because part of me feels like fake it till you make it, and I'm like, when am I going to make it?
Yeah, fair enough. Thank you for being so honest. I have such respect for you for being so honest and sincere, because, by the way, folks, it's everyone's issue. It's not just Edwin. He's just a really honorable and respectful and brave person that brings it to the table. But 100% of my clients, and myself when I was practicing law too, the imposter syndrome thing. Like, am I good enough? Should I be the one advising? So tell me, Edwin, what would being good enough look like? What would you be doing differently than you are now?
I don't know. That's the issue. Right now, I think since we have COVID, I've been wearing more t-shirts and jeans to work, and I have some clients that walk in, and they always ask me, where's the attorney? And I'm like, I am the attorney. And they have to do like a double take, and I'm like, it's COVID time, so I'm not going to wear a suit every day, especially when the dry cleaners were closed. I'm like, so it's a little bit more relaxed. So I do see that, but I do not know what an attorney should look like. I know when I started, I did have my idea, like my first office, I bought all traditional looking furniture, even though that's not even my style, So I had a vision of what I believed traditional attorney should look like. And at the end of the day, it didn't work for me. So I just started making small changes that would be fitting to my personality and also to my line of business. And, immigration law is not like most state courts, so it's a lot of papers. It's a lot of old technology still, because immigration is still stuck in the olden days.
So I think you answered your own question beautifully there for the listeners. There is no what would it look like to be hitting it right out of the ballpark. It is individualized to who you are as a lawyer and as a human being beyond that. And living authentically is what's going to drive you to be a good lawyer. Imposter syndrome, Edwin, from my experience and from my research, comes from the feeling of lack we all have as human beings, that we're not deserving and good enough. And when we start slowly chipping away at that, like you're saying, by, hey, stopping with self awareness and thinking, I don't like this furniture, this isn't me. Well, that presupposes we've stopped and thought, and I applaud you for doing this, that, hey, who am I? What's my story? Why do I do what I do? What brings me joy as a lawyer and as a human being? That slowly erodes the feeling of being an imposter, because when we live authentic lives in one place of our lives, then we live an authentic life as a lawyer and in any career area. So when you just start being authentic, period, then you just start seeing the results of that, because slowly your imposter syndrome concepts go away. And then you start looking at it the way you and I just did, that what would it even be like if I was the perfect lawyer doing the perfect work? I remember those feelings vividly. I've often said this to you guys. I remember being at the law firm. It was probably early 2000 in DC. They were billing me out back then at like $450 an hour, $500 an hour, something ridiculously high for the early 2000s, 20 some years ago. And I vividly remember the moment where I dropped my pen and I looked up at no one in particular, because my clients never saw me, and thought, why is somebody willing to pay this much for me? Do I know what I'm talking about? And that was a low point in my life, because I had imposter syndrome really bad. I was not sure of who I was. I wasn't authentically owning who I was. So I couldn't help but think that my value was tied to a dollar amount that I was not exceeding expectations on. Now, I'm not asking any of you, including Edwin, to change your profession, but I am asking you, as Edwin, I know you regularly do, step back constantly and go, if not you, then who? If you are doing your very best and you are putting your best brand out there and you are showing up every day, and I know you are because you just told us how you are, really choosing to serve people from this place of your story and from your background and wanting them to have access to justice and equal representation and wanting that for your children and diversity to flow, then it comes from an honest place and authenticity of who you are, and that is the best you got. And if that's not good for somebody, then they can go hire somebody else. But that's the baseline, folks. It's nothing else. And we could talk about imposter syndrome till cows come home. It'll always be an issue because we're humans. And, you know, as children, we were taught this, right? I don't know how it was in your household, but in my household and in every other household that we talked about this issue with, you know, especially as immigrants and refugees, you know, we were taught to be grateful for being in this country, and that means you did everything perfectly and really well. And if you didn't, then shame on you because you're wasting an opportunity in this country to not just survive but thrive, right? And that's a good immigrant mentality. However, it kind of breeds perfectionism, I found for myself, and also then the imposter syndrome of, oh my gosh, what if I'm not doing it well enough? And what if I'm not supposed to be doing it this way? So it breeds a lot of doubt too. And until you harness that differently, the result's always going to be maybe it's not good enough. Does that make sense, Edwin?
Completely. And I do see how that resonates in my life. My parents did always talk about opportunity, especially, access to education. That's something they never had. My father didn't even finish first grade, and my mom only made it to ninth grade. So that whole opportunity that we had, they always reminded us, you have an opportunity to an education. Don't let it go to waste. And I think that's probably what breeds the perfectionist in me as well, because I'm a huge perfectionist. Everything I do, I have to look over several times to make sure it's to my liking before I submit it. So, and then, like you said,
Yeah.
that just breeds doubt.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, and as a good lawyer and as a good professional, we all have that tendency, right? That's what makes us good at what we do, that we, you know, give everything our best and want it to be optimal. But there's a difference between optimal and perfect. There is no such thing as perfection, but there is optimal and good enough, frankly. And 100% of the time, our good enough is probably really better than somebody else's mediocre. So, why we don't let that go is beyond me. But take that for what it's worth, Edwin. And next time you're sitting and having those pondering thoughts of imposter syndrome, whatever we want to label it as, really stop and think it's good enough. And what I'm doing from heart plus substantive knowledge and because I care. And then your clients really feel that. And then there's no doubt that creeps in because if we're putting our faith and our hard effort into it, then it has to be good enough. Otherwise, we're going to die trying. I mean, and I know I don't want to get all morose and sad on people, but it's true. You see so much stress causing suicide within any professions, particularly legal. It's because people just put so much burden on themselves for something that's unattainable. We all do it. It's just stopping with self awareness and reflecting and going, I'm just going to stop now because this is good enough. And I'm going to go home to my kids, like you said, because they're the reason I'm doing all this. So it just takes perspective. So try that perspective on next time. Bite yourself a post-it note, folks. I always tell everyone this. Post-it notes to remind us of things because we're busy and we're distracted by so many things in our day. And just those little gentle reminders will allow us to have a self-awareness moment and a wake-up call when we need it the most. Try the post-it notes. What do you think of that?
I think the post-it notes are great. I know you mentioned that to me. I still have my post-it notes on my laptop, and when the post-it note gets old, I just rewrite it and put a new one on there, and they do help. And they do help.
I do the very same thing. My post-it notes get old and I rewrite them. Whatever it takes for us to not digress, right? Having the same conversation again and expecting a different result. We all know what that's the definition of. But if we don't want to repeat the past, then make a change. Get serious about it for yourself and do whatever makes you feel good and feel optimal, because that's the only way you're going to be a contribution to society in a way that is allows you to sleep well at night. Let's put it that way, and allows you to be a good father and a good husband and a good lawyer. Notice how I put it in that order, because that's the order of importance. We need to remember we're humans first, and sleeping well at night is important, because we can't be the best during the day if we don't sleep with a peace of mind that we've done all we can. I got all my post-it notes in place. There's nothing more I can do. I'm just going to do better because it's top of mind, and I'm not going to repeat the past. So there you go. Was that helpful, Edwin?
It was.
All right. Any last parting words?
No parting words. Just thank you for another little coaching session right now.
You're welcome. You're very welcome. I hope it was helpful to the audience too, whoever's listening. I want to thank you, Edwin Reyes, for being a guest on my show. Edwin, if people want to find you, can you share with us your contact information?
They could find me on my webpage, edwinereyes.com. And on that website, you could find my contact information, my phone number, my email address is on there as well. If you want to reach me directly, ereyes@edwinereyes.com.
Fantastic. And that's in Houston, Texas, guys. So I hope this was beneficial to all my listeners. Remember, there's a lot we can do out there to cultivate our brand, to cultivate our best selves. It doesn't have to be difficult. Depending on your profession, it could show up differently. But the point is to dig deep inside and figure out who you truly are, find your greatness, and then allow that purpose to show up, to bubble to the surface, and have yourself serve the best way you can to benefit the public and benefit your family and benefit your life, regardless of what's going on out there in the world. COVID-19, immigration law changes, whatever it is, you're in control of your brand and you matter. So thank you very much for everyone for listening. And until next time, Katy out.